Thank you for joining us at a Bethel University Forum. We're really glad to have you here. My name is Rebecca Sanborn-Stone, and I'm wearing a couple of hats tonight. I'm one of the volunteer organizers with Bethel University, which is a free community pop-up university here in Bethel, Vermont. And I'm also a member of the steering committee and working on Bethel for All, which is a community planning process working to make Bethel a more connected, vibrant, accessible place. And we're lucky to have a few members of our team here tonight on the steering committee and one of our consultant team members. So a few housekeeping notes. And before I do launch into those, I want to give you all a challenge to think about. We're not going to go around and do introductions with everyone at this stage, but do invite you to introduce yourself in chat and say hello. And the challenge I want to give you is to think of a 6-word vision for livable, walkable, accessible communities. If you're a Bethel resident, you can think about your vision here in town in just 6 words. What do you picture when you picture safe streets, mobility options, a great community to live in and get around? And if you're not from Bethel, just picture your community or wherever you want to be. So when you have a response, you can dump that into the chat as well and just let us know who you are. So first of all, a few housekeeping notes, again, about Bethel University. Since 2014, BU has offered nearly 400 classes and attracted thousands of students and professors from all over the world. So we are really excited to have you here. And we have more than half the month still ahead of great classes this semester. So join us online, check out more events, bu-vt.org. And that includes 3 more accessibility forums through Bethel University as well. We are going to be back on here next Tuesday night talking about clean water and river access. We will be here on the 23rd looking at accessible buildings and public spaces and streets. And the last one on March 29th, we'll dig into vibrant villages and rural economies. So we hope you'll come back for all of those. And with that, I think we're going to dive in. We have 2 fabulous speakers we're going to hear from tonight. Bethel for All is really looking at what we can do to make Bethel a better place for everybody who lives here and visits and works here. But so many of our rural communities in Vermont and beyond are facing a lot of the same challenges, and a lot of the issues we see here and a lot of the ideas we have for Bethel, we hope will be just as relevant to those of you who are not from town tonight. So as we dig in, we'll talk a lot about Bethel and what we're finding here, but encourage you to please throw in examples in what you're finding from your own communities if you don't live here, or even communities you know, and think about what really resonates for you as well. We're going to hear first from an amazing partner and collaborator in Bethel for a long time. Kelly Stoddard-Poor is the Associate State Director of AARP Vermont. And Kelly has partnered with us here in Bethel for longer than I want to say at this point, Kelly, 7 years, 6 years, I think. Kelly came and helped Bethel host Vermont's first Better Block project in 2016, which is really what kicked off a lot of what we're doing here tonight. We had the great chance to test out some amazing strategies for revitalizing our downtown and increasing walkability. And now, 5 years later, we're really looking at how to make those permanent and which ones we can really put into place. We are really excited also to have Dayton Kreitz here from DuBois and King. He is a planner on the consultant team that we're working with. So Bethel for All is funded by a Vermont Better Connections grant, which is a program of VTrans and the Agency of Commerce and Community Development. And Dayton is part of the team that's crunching the numbers and looking at the data and recommending a lot of solutions for us to consider here. And again, a lot of ideas that will be relevant to other places. So we're going to hear from Kelly first. She'll showcase a lot of what's going on around the state, great ideas for how other communities are addressing safer streets and mobility options. We'll hear from Dayton to get a sense of what's actually going on the ground here. What are some of the options and how might we deal with it? We would love to hear ideas from you. We'll have time for question and answers. And then at the very end, we're really going to pick your brains. We'll put up an interactive map for those of you who know Bethel and ask you to drop pinpoints on and tell us exactly where the problem areas are, where you love to walk and bike, where you want to see improvements. And we'll have a great chat about some of the priorities you'd like to see come out of this planning process. So with that, I'm going to pass it off to Kelly, and we will get started tonight. Please do feel free to keep putting your intros in the chat as well. Love the 6-word visions that are coming out as Kelly gets started here, and we'll share a few of those afterwards.
Great. Well, thank you, Rebecca, so much for the warm welcome. And I'm really happy to see everybody virtually. It's so great to see so many familiar faces. I do apologize ahead of time. I'm fighting off a cold, so I'm a little bit nasally and might have to take a couple pauses for some water. But I'm going to talk about mobility, safe streets, one of my most favorite topics. And pictured here is a picture from Bethel's Better Block, and which is one of my favorite images because the street is so active and lively, and there are so many different types of uses along the street. So I hope to cover the following things today. I want to talk about demographic changes, national trends that are happening, and why it's so important to approach community planning differently. And also why it's important and why we should act now as well. And some of the benefits of a livable, walkable community and some innovative approaches that are happening across Vermont communities. So I don't think that this comes to any surprise to anybody here, but by 2035, for the first time ever in the United States, older adults 65 and older will outnumber children for the first time in our history. And so that is really, really important when we think about how our country is aging and how we're planning for that aging. And here is from 2015 to 2030 and the proportion of the population that will be over the age of 65. 1 in 4 adults in Vermont by 2030 will be over the age of 65. And here's some more specific Vermont data here, where we see the trends as our state gets darker green, representing 20% of the population over the age of 65. Both the Northeast Kingdom and the southwest corners of our state are by far the oldest. And this isn't like a blip that's happening. This is a very permanent way that we are aging in our country. So, for instance, my 10-year-old daughter has a 50% chance of living until she is 100. And so, yes, we are aging, but we're also we're living longer, and we're living healthier lives, and we're living more active lives than we have in the past. And older adults are staying connected to their community and engaged in many different ways. 65 no longer represents a hard stop. I need to stop working. People are working past the age of 65 in more flexible jobs, and they're staying active and volunteering in their communities. So we really need to think about how we're planning for our communities and planning for that demographic shift. So for the last 50 years, our communities have really been designed and planned around the use of the automobile and not necessarily around how people are moving around in their community. And yet, when we survey adults over the age of 45, and this happens year after year of our survey, is that what we hear from adults over the age of 45 is that they want to stay in their community and they want to stay in their home as long as possible. But our communities haven't necessarily been designed to support this aging in place. And the mix, I like looking at this slide because it really looks at both baby boomers and millennials, because often in Vermont, the narrative is, we just need to attract more younger people here, and we forget about all of the assets and the people that already live here in the state. Both millennials and boomers want walkable, mixed use neighborhoods. They want to trade off that shorter commute for a smaller home. They want to have accessible, walkable streets. They want to have access to grocery stores and safe parks and pharmacies. And so I think it's really important when we think about the assets that exist in our community and the assets that we're planning for, really meet the needs of both older adults and young adults. So some of the key pieces that AARP looks at when we think about a livable community, and really it's thinking about how we can create walkability and decrease the dependence on automobiles so that people can remain independent and and connected to their community. And so how we can support the public realm and public spaces is really critical to all of that. And integrating land uses. So thinking about our downtowns and our village centers and thinking about mixed use development is really key so that people can live near resources and assets and public parks and things like that. And then housing diversity is also really critical to that. So ensuring that we have appropriate housing available for each phase that you're at in your lifespan. So, and I know that this conversation that we're going to have is not focused on housing. So I won't get too much into the housing piece. And then thinking about the variety of transportation options that are also available so that people can walk, bike, use public transit, carpool, so that there's a variety of ways that people can stay mobile. And those benefits of a walkable, livable community are huge. So there's a tremendous impact that it has on our public health. We're able to stay active. We're able to exercise easily, and we're able to access public health services as well. Some of the economic development benefits, also that it's reducing our transportation costs. I mean, all of us are probably shocked at the price of gas right now in the country. But if we're able to walk more easily, run our errands by using a bus or biking to places, that helps reduce our transportation costs. And also we're able to support the local economy. And then the environmental impact is obviously pollution reduction, and it's more energy efficient to have a livable community. And lastly, my most important piece around building a livable, walkable community is that it builds social capital and it supports a strong democracy as well. So to get a little bit more into our transportation options, I wanted to put this up here because I think it's really important when we do think about the fact that we all are aging, all of us, is that it is likely that we'll outlive our driving years. And so if we all took a moment to think about what we would do if we had to hang up the keys to our car tomorrow, how would we get around, and would we be able to do everything that we need to do to live our life? Transit funding is just a small sliver of what we're paying in our total transportation budget. And so we need to really think about how we're investing in public transit. And then bike ped fatalities are on the rise across the country. Older adults, people of color, and low-income Americans are disproportionately impacted by pedestrian fatalities. And so we really need to be thoughtful about how we're planning for all different types of uses of our streets and sidewalks, and ability level and age and background. And isolation is also up. That's not a surprise to anybody, but the risk that isolation poses to our health is tremendous. It's equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. So this graph is from Smart Growth America, just showing the rise in people struck by vehicles while walking. And it's really upsetting when we see this. And I think the most important piece here is to really think about how speed and safety do not go together. We cannot continue to prioritize the travel of high-speed vehicles if we also want to prioritize pedestrian and bike safety. So this is where Complete Streets comes in. We have wonderful public policy that was passed back in 2011 that supports Complete Streets, and that's thinking about all users and all abilities of the road. So when our roads are going to be constructed or they're going to be repaired, we need to consider all users of our roadways. And so that's a really great opportunity to think about how we can make our streets more multimodal. And we want to be thinking about our crosswalks, speed, and different types of bike strategy and overall connectivity with public transit. And I always like to remind people is that our streets are public spaces. They belong to us, and we need to think about how they're being used and the opportunity to really use, to take underutilized streets and be able to turn them more into public spaces. Featured on the right is a parklet in Winooski, and on the left are some curb extensions that we did with local motion in Burlington. And now there's more permanent changes that have been done to that intersection. So as I was saying earlier, speed is the number one thing that I think really deters people from walking and biking. When the roads and the sidewalks feel unsafe, it's often because vehicle traffic is going too fast and it feels unsafe to cross the street. And the noise from the vehicles is also a deterrent as well. So looking at ways that you can help reduce the speed is a way to make walkability more inviting and more comfortable. Another important piece is thinking about accessibility for everybody. The man featured in the left-hand corner is coming down a beautiful curb cut and comes to a street with no crosswalk, no curb cut on the other side to connect him to that sidewalk. So we really need to think about how our streets and our sidewalks are inviting for all users. And then making walk bike options available. The picture featured on the left there of the woman biking, there's a nice buffer between the sidewalk, the bike lane, and then the road. And then on the picture in the middle is a rural option where we have a wider shoulder there for people to be able to walk where a sidewalk might not be an option. And then on the far right, we've got the bike share program up in Burlington. So thinking about different ways for people to get around, everybody will recognize the pictures on the left from Bethel's Better Block, the blue lane, and ways that you can be able to test out some of those changes and get people to provide feedback is always a wonderful way to find new solutions to tackling walkability. And as I had shared earlier, crosswalks at intersections can be really dangerous for some people, and it can deter people from walking. My office is up in Burlington, and it's at the corner of Main and Winooski. And to be honest, a lot of times I avoid that intersection because I've been almost hit a couple of times walking across that crosswalk. People are turning right on red, they're speeding through the intersection, and it's completely uninviting. And I'm an able-bodied 40-something-year-old. So when people think about all users of the road, we really want to be thinking about people from all age levels and ability level. So sidewalks and buffers, ways that we can help calm the traffic, street trees, planters are wonderful ways, signage as well to help people calm the traffic and provide some buffer between the people who are walking and the roadway. And then that overall connectivity to our public transit system is really critical throughout the year. It provides a critical safety net. And for people who don't drive, which is a third of our population, 1 in 5 older adults over the age of 65 no longer drives. Children do not drive. Many people with disabilities do not drive. And there's a lot of people who decide just simply not to drive. So we want to make sure that we have a robust and funded public transit system with amenities that make it inviting and dignified to ride the bus, like a bus shelter and benches and lighting, bike racks at the bus stop. Those are all really critical things to help support our public transit system. So reclaiming public spaces is also another really important piece of like helping to calm down traffic. We've got another parklet featured on the left. And then the picture on the right there is in Fairhaven, and they just reclaimed some parking spaces to make some outdoor places where people could sit, which is another way to just be able to take back some of pavement and make it useful for people. The picture there on the left is in Brattleboro. There's an alleyway activation that they did right next to the transit center. So it gave great connectivity from their streets to the transit center. And then on the right-hand side is Montpelier. That's a parking lot where the farmers market used to be hosted, which are just beautiful, bringing really simple designs and color to parking lots and alleyways really just helps to generate and activate that public life. The Old East End neighborhood in Burlington, we did a walk audit a few years back there, looking at, one was the big thing was speed. People were just running through stop signs. There was very little crosswalks available, and they looked at a number of ways to be able to help calm the traffic. One of the things that they did was feature some public art along the street to help reduce and calm traffic, and then also added some crosswalks. And then in the winter months, they looked at really activating their public park there and getting the trails made and signed, as well as for the first year this year, it is now being plowed, the pathway, the sidewalk and the pathway all the way up to the park, providing great overall year-round connection. And then in Northfields, they looked at their village green right in their village center, and looked at the connectivity out to Dog River Park, which is just about a half a mile. And there's broken sidewalk along this pathway. And so they looked at really looking at this very wide street and providing a temporary pedestrian bike lane with some paint and stencils and some colored sticks. Now they have some more temporary bollards that are on the side of the road now, that really now provides some walkability and bikeability for folks to be able to access from their village green out to the Dog River Park. And there's the intersection that is very wide and can feel really unsafe for people who are crossing it. And they've been really able to take this project and evolve it over the years. And we're hoping to do some further demonstration projects there this May with local motion, and be able to continue to support work that's happening there so that they can eventually get a sidewalk fully funded in their community. And that is it for me.
Great. Thank you so much, Kelly. That was wonderful. And just want to call your attention as well to a link that I put into chat. Bethel for All has a page set up to add comments on what you want to see happening in Bethel, where the problem spots are, where you love to walk and bike, and an interactive map as well. We'll use those in the latter part of this forum when we're putting our input on the map, but please open it up anytime and you can add your input there in the chat. Dayton, over to you.
Thank you, Rebecca. So hi, everybody. My name is Dayton Kreitz, and I'm a planner with DuBois King, and so helping sort of move this Bethel for All project forward in terms of a technical document, and something that, you know, when it's all said and done, can be a really great launching pad for you, for your community, to take forward and realize some of these visions, some of these things we're talking about tonight. And I really appreciate being able to, you know, stand on the shoulders of giants and come behind Kelly, because I think she did a great job laying out the why. You know, why is this important? Why are we even here talking about accessible towns and accessible walkability when, hey, we live in Vermont and it's hilly and it's cold, and, you know, we all live far away on, you know, rural lots. We aren't going to get away from the car anytime soon in some sort of complete utopic, no one drives a car anymore. But I think the thing we really think about when we think about quality communities is that we're going to have to use cars at some point or another, or transit, to get places. But once you get there, once you get to the village, no one really wants a village to be a place for cars and just a big parking lot. I've got a few towns I could recommend in Texas if you'd like to see that. But we want to get to villages that are great places for people. And really, so when we think about this, and when we think about promoting better street design, better consideration of how land uses access to those streets, we're just thinking about places for people. So let me jump in, and I'll share my screen here and go through a couple of our findings about Bethel specifically, and some of the conflicts and challenges we're seeing. So I see in a big white slide, I would hope. Okay, let me just get that a little bit bigger, get rid of some miscellany. So I want to start talking about the landscape, because as a planner, and really, I'm excited to be here tonight also just for listening. You're gonna hear me talk for the next few minutes, but I want to listen too, because what we come to as planners of town with is, well, we can study it from a landscape perspective, we can study it from a data perspective, And that gets us a lot of information that I'll share with you here shortly. But then the other half of this is really the people's stories and experiences in Bethel, because many of you on this call, I work in Randolph, I've been through Bethel, I've shopped in Bethel, I've enjoyed the time in a park in Bethel, but you guys live there, and I'm looking forward to hearing more about your experiences. But when we talk about this, the project area for the whole Better Connections project is outlined in red here. And the area in pink is your designated village center. And so we're going to kind of talk about, portions of both of this. But when we talk about a landscape, a map sort of makes it look simple. It makes it's a two-dimensional representation. There's a river in there. I guess there's a railroad. There's a state highway. But I try to get into photos and sections and perspectives to really communicate it, because one of the biggest challenges we have with planning for active transportation and developing active transportation in 2022 in the United States, or frankly almost anywhere else developed, is that we've used a lot of the easy space, right? So Bethel, like so many Vermont communities, is, I have this between a rock and a hard place as a sort of a lighthearted label up there, but it's between a rock and a mountain and a railroad and a highway and historic buildings and a river. So where do we fit this all in, right? And that's a lot of the sort of the challenge that comes forward when we think about these things. In section, just sort of graphic section of the wall, and just trying to represent those dimensions, we get our rulers out. We start to measure out, well, how wide is our roadway? How wide is the public right of way that's represented by these dashed lines on either side? And how do we fit things in? Where do people fit, right? And we're really trying to work to see how we can work that through. In Bethel, outside of those constraints topographically, we've gone through, and there's been an accessibility audit conducted to look at, in terms of using a wheelchair to get around Bethel, in terms of walking comfortably for all ages and abilities, where are the issues? And we've started to see some clusters that definitely show us that, the village center needs attention. We're seeing ADA and sidewalk issues around the triangle. And quite a bit more. So those are sort of some of the initial findings that are documented in our first report. And then real quickly, we could use chat for this, because I think everybody's doing pretty good down there. Here's a question for you. So patterns and data, one of the things we go to right away is, okay, well, what are the traffic counts? What is the AADT? So technical speak for average annualized daily traffic, which is, there's a whole background of how engineers calculate this, but roughly, how many cars travel through it in a day? So does anybody have a guess for how much Bethel's Main Street has? And for frames of reference here, you don't have 19,000, that's the interstate. Randolph up the road from you has about 8,000 on their main street. Bristol, Vermont on their main street has about 4,600. Route 100 in Rochester, 2,400, and your Sandhill Road has 324. 2,000 is Lisa Campbell's guess. It's an excellent guess. Any other guesses? Someone go high, someone go low, split the difference. Here, I like these other guesses coming in. 6,500. All right, any else? Tick, 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 tick. We're looking at about 5,400. So, to go back on that, thanks for playing my game, Lisa and Lily. It's nice to have participation there. That's what you're seeing there. And the South Main Street, as you get past the wall, has significantly more. It's not labeled on this slide, but I think the figures were up in the 7,000s. And those numbers are important to us, aside from just being numbers, because they recommend different treatments. To go back here, Sandhill Road with 324. When we're talking about pedestrian facilities there, I'm thinking signs. You don't need a lot more than something with that few cars on it, unless the conditions and visibility are really bad. You can have safe shared streets at a really low volume. But obviously, when we get up to 19,000, we're saying, don't walk over there, that's an interstate. And in the realm of this 5,000 to 6,000, where Bethel finds itself, points out a real need for, let's build good infrastructure for walking and biking, because we have enough traffic here. So that's one of the pieces of data that we start with. The other thing we look at is crash data. And this is of course reported crashes. Someone has an accident, doesn't report it to anybody, doesn't get kind of fed up the chain through police or otherwise, then it might not make this chart. But this represents overall crash data reported between, I think, 2012 and 2016, which is the last data set that VTrans has published. And Main Street's identified as a high crash location. That's the bad news. And it points to sort of a need for a different approach. The good news is that most of this is either unknown information or property damage only. There's a couple injuries down on River Street, But we're not seeing big records of fatalities. So, I mean, that's, as far as good news goes, that's reasonably good news. And so crashes are relatively minor, but there's a lot of them. And so what's causing that? And how can our designs for our streets address that by slowing people down, creating a street that requires drivers and pedestrians and cyclists to all pay more attention? How does that work? And then I want to talk a little bit about networks and destinations here too. This map has all these little flags on it calling out destinations in Bethel, and there's many more, but I just picked out a few of the parks in green, employers of GW Plastic, elementary school, and library called out in purple, and town hall in blue here to orient yourself. But the green network, if I purposely tried to take this map and really fade back the roadway network and say, okay, no more road, no more 2 travel lane for me to drive my Subaru on. This is our transportation network when it comes down to everyone Kelly was talking about that doesn't have easy access to a car. And it points out some really key needs, gaps, right? If you're walking on the south side of the street in the village, you get about here to Babe's Bar, and then what, right? Same thing here. If you're trying to go down to river access and you need to get across the wall, there's some big gaps, and maybe it's just a big driveway, but it points to opportunities for improvement. And same for just creating contiguous networks all the way out past the rec fields to the elementary school. How can we do this better? Anywhere there's one-sided gives better than nothing, but also if you want to go 2 ways, you've got to cross the street. And each one of these red marks is existing pedestrian crossings. But I know as a first-time visitor to Bethel, I was sort of confused about where I need to cross the street in order to access the next piece of sidewalk. And this map, I think, also points out opportunities that you've got some great trail networks burgeoning from right there in the village center. Again, a destination, a reason to walk, a reason to park the car once and take all your errands on foot and go do recreation on foot or bicycle. But how do we link to those things? And so I think a lot of what we think about is building networks that are completely connected, because if you look at any road map, you open up Google Maps on your phone and try to route your map anywhere, the roads are contiguous. The roads are connected for our vehicles, but we need to make that same connection, particularly in our villages, for us, the people on foot, on bike, on wheels. So those are just some of the quick kind of analyses of the snapshot of what we're seeing. I can answer questions and dive into any more detail that people would like. But then we're looking at what can Bethel do? And I think Kelly did a great job of running through numerous examples. But when we think back about these destinations, one thing I'm not mentioning, I'm trying to point out some of the areas for improvement. Bethel has a good backbone of pedestrian infrastructure. I mean, sure, we can talk about ways these sidewalks need improvement, and we will, but it's there. And there's other villages that don't even have that. And so some of this is saying, how do we promote Bethel as a walking village? How do we make people realize that, hey, if you come here, you don't need to take your car for every single trip in the village for going to each of these places. It's only 4 minutes to walk from Babe's Bar over to the rec fields. And that's what this slide's about. Communities often, some of that low-hanging fruit is finding funding for really good wayfinding signage. And whether it's a map of the town that shows it to you right there so people can orient and understand their wayfinding signage, or creative things like yellow flags to just sort of wave as you cross the street and say, I'm here. Or creative ideas where it's hard to see on this photo, and I apologize about that, but this is a town that printed out, well, here's where you're going on this pathway. And on foot, it's going to take you 15 minutes. On bike, it'll take you 5 minutes. And sort of time orientation that even if you see this one time and you're not planning to go that far, it's a good reminder to say, oh, well, it's only 5 minutes. Maybe next time I'll walk. And also thinking of what you've already done, you're already famous. I mean, Kelly used a picture from this event. I'm using a picture from this event. Everybody likes pictures from this event. Your town did an amazing job with this. You're already famous for this, but where else can it go? Should it just be focused down here on Main Street, or can it expand out? And I think as that destination map that I was showing about destinations and the overall pedestrian network, I think it's about really kind of expanding outside of this and expanding on what you're already famous for as these activation projects into all the resources that are surrounding Bethel. Parks and placemaking really come to mind. And I think there's a lot of opportunity in your parks to really call out. I was astounded actually when we first bid on this project and I came down to take a slow, careful look at Bethel about all the great resources from your rec fields to a skate park to the bandshell park. all in a walking distance around this really great village center. And I think placemaking in that and celebrating those spaces even more is potentially an opportunity to encourage people to walk to them and make an event out of it. And then I'm also thinking about everything Kelly was saying about speed versus safety is absolutely true when it comes to our public streets, right? We can make really good, efficient roadways that transport a lot of goods and services and vehicles really, really well. And they're terrible and scary to walk on because people are moving so fast, and they're designed so a driver doesn't have to think very much. The more a driver has to think, the more a driver is concerned, the more there is evidence of homes next to the street, that use is pulled up more closely to the street, speed bumps in the street, symbols for walking and biking in the street, roadways that get narrower. Sometimes this is just done by paint as early efforts. Sometimes these speed bumps can be temporary to test them out or come out in winter. But these are some of the really good ways to really slow things down. And the slower it can get in the village center, the safer it's going to get for people. And obviously, we don't need people moving at 2 miles an hour. That might be a little slow, but it can be a lot better than our standards. So that's a really quick overview of what I've got. And I really, again, I'm looking forward to the rest of this evening to listen to your ideas from lived experiences in Bethel, and happy to talk any further, answer any other questions about sort of the technical side and what we're looking at in the broadest scope.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Dayton. So with that, we do want to open up the floor to any questions, first of all, for Kelly and Dayton. And if we get through questions, then have some discussion. So we're just going to let you all try having a free-for-all and come off mute if you want to do that. If it ends up being chaotic, we'll manage it a little bit more. But invite you all to jump in if you do have any questions or reflections on what you heard. We certainly welcome those of you who are not from Bethel also to chime in with your own questions about your communities or anything you heard here tonight. So is there anybody who wants to jump in? Julie? Yeah.
I really appreciate your remarks about expanding the area for walking. I guess this is for Dayton, for walking areas and pedestrian biking areas in the central part or the expanded part of Bethel. The only problem is I can't walk. I mean, I can walk, but not very far. So that means your pedestrian area has to have wheelchair accessibility, or I can't walk from downtown to the rec center. That's way out of my range, at least at this point. How do people who have that disability manage it? What do you think? Do you have any suggestions?
So I do, and I would say, I'll look to you for help people with that disability management, because that the lived experience is a big piece of it that I don't have. But the number one thing I see, so here's a number, 6 feet, okay? And take a ruler out, go to sidewalks all over. I'm not going to pick on Bethel, I'll pick on the United States. So go to sidewalks anywhere in the United States and measure the width of them. They're 4 to 5 feet almost always. In some really urban areas, you're going to get plaza sidewalks or bigger sidewalks that get beyond that. But 6 feet should be the standard, if not more. Exactly for what you brought up there, Julie, is that one of the things we'll be looking at is taking that space for pedestrians, not 6 feet because it's nice, but if you put two wheelchairs trying to cross each other on a 4-foot sidewalk, it just won't go. You can't get a person past a wheelchair user. On a 5-foot sidewalk, a person can kind of step to the side and maybe a wheelchair can pass. On a 6-foot sidewalk, you actually have room for that. And there's arguments to take it even a little further to 7 or 8 feet. But as sort of my first slides talk to, what we're always battling against a little bit is those constraints. But what we tend to see is that often the travel lanes established for a highway in a rural part of Vermont, that same applicability is applied to the same design is applied to the middle of the village. And that's usually where we see opportunity to say, hey, if we can right size the travel lanes, we'll encourage people to slow down, and we'll give more space for wheelchair users and others to use our sidewalks. So 6 feet, that's the starting point.
Thank you.
Can I add on to that, if you don't mind? I just would also encourage to think about seating options that are along the walking routes. as well, and thinking about the placement of them, making sure that they stay out year round. Some towns remove some seating. I mean, I live in Montpelier, and there's a number of benches that are removed in the excuse me, in the winter months. And just thinking also about lighting and how important that is too, particularly in the winter months. And then having an understanding of when snow will be removed from sidewalks after a storm, and having that conversation with the town manager, and making sure that there's a reasonable time when snow is removed after storms will also help increase that overall accessibility.
And I'd actually say too that for town managers' perspectives as well, and something that we've seen discussed is usually a priority plan. I mean, they're so swamped after a big storm, knowing key sidewalk routes that should be plowed first ahead before of the whole town, because otherwise they might just think, well, I'm starting at the west and I'm getting to the east. But really using the planning process to identify these are the core routes that are most needed after a storm that connect to the key services and destinations, can often help them achieve the goals that the community wants to see.
I'll interject quickly with a couple project notes here. We did have a full accessibility audit of town, as Dayton mentioned, and that report will be available very soon in the forum we have on the 23rd. We'll dig into that a little bit more, really looking at what changes we need to make to accommodate a range of disabilities and special needs and challenges in town. And part of it is really looking at those gaps. I'm glad Dayton pointed out how Bethel actually has a pretty decent sidewalk network. And there are a lot of places where our sidewalks are fine for wheelchairs and all sorts of modes of transportation. But if there's one little gap, then that causes a big problem. So that's part of what the accessibility audit looked at. Where is there an issue just getting onto the sidewalk? I think someone pointed out at the start of this process, we don't have any accessible parking spaces downtown. So however nice our sidewalks are, if you can't get to it, that's going to be a big problem. And we would really love to get very specific information from all of you. Where are the places that cause you problems? What are the specific ones that are trouble spots? And where do you like to go? Where do you want to be able to go, where we could prioritize some of those improvements? And we do actually have a small amount of funding through this project, and probably we'll have more coming, where we can try out some of these quick solutions like benches that Kelly mentioned, or signage or flags. So be thinking as well, what would you like to see us try quickly this year? Other questions for Dayton and Kelly?
Yeah, this is Cindy. I'm always puzzled by what to do about the hills that we have in the downtown. We have a nice parking area, but in order to get to the street level, you have to travel down. And I know we had town meeting at the town hall one year, and it was great, except for folks who had a handicap. They couldn't get from the parking lot into the town hall, just because that's such a steep hill there. So I'm challenged to think about creative ways to deal with those hilly areas that could cause problems for people who have a little more challenge getting around.
I'll take a swing at responding to that, and I wish I could respond with well, here's the solution. But if I could do that, we'd be well ahead and started to implement those things. But we're not there yet. But I think the approach that we're envisioning right now is that heat map I showed is part of the part of the summary document that points to this accessibility report. And I think we're planning to really lean on finding the right priority projects, because the short answer is you can't solve it all at once, right? We won't, because they're hills, they're older buildings that are built up on a different elevation, and to build easily accessible ramps, which are a great way to get up there regardless of whether you're using a wheelchair or not, to build those to every single public building and every single commercial building too heavy of a lift, but we're looking at, I think, the public process and our accessibility audit report to really prioritize those steps and find out where the most valuable pieces of that are. And I think it's creative design of ramps is one of the most straightforward ways, and you can test them out in more of a plywood sense over a summer and decide to invest more moving forward with more permanent materials long term. But I think for finding the right points of acupuncture to make the biggest difference is, I think, what we're anticipating on that. But challenging question. That is the big dilemma.
Other questions?
One is whether an audit, whether or not.
Rebecca?
Mhm.
Another comment I have, I don't know if it's a question. Maybe it is a question. How do you widen a street where there's no place to widen it? I'm specifically talking about from Cockadoodle Pizza down to, I guess, Bethel Mills building. That is so narrow for cars.
Mhm.
So it's even difficult for cars and people to manage it. But as soon as you get past Cockadoodle-Doo, the road is wider, the sidewalk, and I realize that that's a land use the way it has been historically. But what else could we do if you have no place to take space from for sidewalks?
Great question. Dayton or Kelly want to jump in?
I'm going to share my screen and jump in. So here's a little section, happens to be right at Cockadoodle Pizza that we're in our report, right? This is what you're talking about. And
Yes.
It's spot on. So the short answer is something's got to give, right?
Mm-hmm.
Something has to give from this equation, right? Because right now, without adjusting things, there is no more room. We're using the entire street from building to building for sidewalk, parking, travel lane, parking, sidewalk. That it's used. There's no more space. But there's space when we think about what can bend and when we sort of talk about, so what's more important, the convenience of parking right outside, using a car and parking right outside a building, or having a really great pedestrian space and having to park on the edge of it, right? And that's sort of one of those first things you look at. And it's always a trade-off. Some communities say, no, we need that parking. This is a constant conversation I'm in that has a different outcome with every community that I've worked with. But the parking spaces you see on one side, it's about a 7-foot parking aisle. On the other side, it's 8 foot. Well, there's maybe a foot we could gain if we even those out. The travel lanes are 11 foot, and that's sort of the V-Trans standard for village centers. They don't like to go any narrower than that, but there are national standards that point to the functionality of having a 10-foot travel lane. So right there, I'm just sort of riffing and maybe got 3 feet. And then the thing that I can't answer right off the top of this, but I know having been in Bethel, it's sort of been a thought process. Is there a way to work through public-private partnerships that integrate the front end of those buildings into the streetscape more and gain a few more feet on I guess that's the south side by Cockadoodle Pizza. There's all creative ideas. And then the big game is if parking and many communities have done this. So in a commercial center, parking is paramount. I mean, that's a really important resource. You can't get rid of parking. That's going to hurt the overall economy of an area. But instead of having parking lining both sides, maybe there's creative solutions. Well, there's parking on the south side here, but then no parking on the south side and parking on the north side. And by staggering parking like that, or sort of really choosing the portions where you have to have parking rather than saying parking should be a given throughout, there's where you can really create big change in the public realm for walkability. And so those types of decisions are what, we kind of look at the data, look at the community stories, try to understand the environment downtown to make recommendations about how that could shift. But I think as you're maybe hearing as an undertone as I describe it, if you right size parking, that might be where you get your space.
Thank you.
I will just also add that was a great response, Dayton, that the more narrow the lanes are, the slower cars are going to be traveling. So it does really help with speed. So the wider the street, the faster cars are going to be going. So trying to manage that, and as Dayton shared, managing the priorities and use of the road is obviously a community conversation that will have to happen. But I think, a solution obviously could be removing parking on one side or staggering it to expand the sidewalks.
This reminds me a lot of some of the data we collected during the Better Block project. So a lot of you probably remember it. Kelly has an amazing array of radar guns and speed guns, which we're going to get to use again this spring. And we collected a lot of speed data. So Bethel's speed limit is 25 through downtown. When we measured before Better Block, cars were going on average, I think about 27, something like that. And when we measured during Better Block, when there was tons of stuff happening and we had bulb outs and elements in place to narrow that, it had dropped way down to the low 20s. So just those elements, no policing, no permanent infrastructure changes really did that. And I actually remember one comment from someone saying, I hate the bulb outs. They made me slow down. And we said, exactly, this is what we wanted to do. But people do hate it. So it takes a lot of people coming out and saying, actually, this is what we want for our downtown, and countering that message.
And also too, what we found during the Better Block as well was the noise decibel. I don't know if Lisa and Lily, if you remember this too, but just the sound was so high before, and then during Better Block, it was like so much quieter. I forget the decibel change, but it was pretty significant. Same number of cars coming through, but just the noise level was completely different.
That's great. So we're going to transition in a minute and actually dive into some more specific ideas. I want to put one person on the spot here. We haven't talked a whole lot about transit and how else we might be able to get people to and from downtown and other places without cars. But we have Mike here. Mike is working with Tri-Valley Transit. Mike, feel free to pass, but if you do want to jump in at all, I'd be really curious what you have to say about Bethel. What do you feel like is working with transit? Do you have things you're looking at or hoping to change, or any areas where you'd want input?
Yes, we definitely, I think Bethel, I'm excited about Bethel and the connection between, the hub of our services in Randolph and the connection to Bethel there. So many of our bus routes, commuter routes, circulators, go right through Bethel. We tend to access the interstate, I-89, at exit 3, not exit 4. This gives us a chance to, one, pick up people in town. We recognize that it might be faster to jump on the highway on exit 4 and scoot right down, get off at exit 3, grab some more people at the park and ride and head down. But that, the distance between downtown Bethel and that exit 3 park and ride is significant for somebody. So if we're trying to replace, substitute car travel for the bus, it's an awful lot easier for somebody to, walk from their housing downtown to a stop right in town rather than getting in their car, driving to the park and ride. By the time you do that, forget it, I'll just drive to work. It's easier that way. As far as our circulator services that really connect Bethel and Randolph, for shopping purposes, recreation purposes, social activities. We are in Bethel 3 times a day, once in the morning, then midday, and then later afternoon. We would love to expand that. Of course, comes with a cost. And I really appreciate Kelly's comments about supporting public transportation and helping, especially helping the people that don't or choose not to drive. Some great opportunities there with more funding as it relates to time and driver resources. We'd love to provide additional trips down there. And I think, Rebecca, as you're kind of alluding to there, the access, I think, is so important. Currently, we will stop at the White Church primarily for commuter routes, but but on the circulator as well. We'll also stop at the Depot Apartments. Very tricky to get in and out of that parking lot. It's kind of a high target area for us. We have quite a few residents there that will travel by bus, but really a downtown accessible, visible bus stop would be absolutely wonderful. A place to sit down, place to rest, shelter from inclement weather. I think would all do a lot just for the visibility, so people know that the bus is there, it's accessible, and it's open to them. So many times we hear, oh yeah, that bus is for the elderly and people with disabilities. It's like, well, sure, it's also there for everybody else that wants to get on and get to a grocery store, get to recreational activities. So yeah, we would love to see some built structure in there that helps to promote the services, and yeah, would love to work on expanding those services available as well.
Great. All right, I'm going to just give a few last housekeeping details on what comes next if you are planning to jump off. We have more excitement ahead with this project for sure, aside from the other 3 forums on different topics coming up. So lots of opportunities to share your input online. And for those of you who are willing to stick around, we'll give you a tour of that and do a brain dump before we lose you all tonight. We are going to be working with Kelly in the next few weeks to do some actual walk audits and get out downtown. So I'm going to let Kelly talk a little bit more about what that entails, but anybody who wants to get out and help us collect some data and really look closely at the streets, what needs work, where we can make some improvements, what fun and exciting things we might want to try. That would be great. And what may be the most exciting announcement is that we are really lucky we get to have Team Better Black come back this year. So thanks again to Kelly and AARP. We will have Andrew Howard from Better Black coming back into town. I'm seeing lots of hand raised in May or early June, possibly, I think May, to help us plan some additional demonstrations. So Dayton and his team will help us design those as well. This time, it's not just about what we imagine as community members, but pulling this data back in to say, what are some of these potential long-term solutions that could end up in the plan? And what do we want to test out through these demonstrations? So there will be a lot of opportunities for everybody to get involved. And hope you'll all come out and participate in some of those walk audits or help lead one. We're going to do a training as well. If you're willing to lead a walk around town, even for 3 of your friends, we would love to have you do that, or even check out a kit at the library and go collect your own data. So we will keep you all posted about those opportunities. Kelly, do you want to talk a little bit more about walk audits and any other last tips or advice for people on working on?
I think just stay tuned, because we'll be setting some dates to do some quick trainings for folks to go out and lead some of the walk audits. And we have an updated audit tool, which I think is much more user friendly. And we've added a worksheet that will be focused on winter walkability, which I'm really excited about, because that was one thing that the old tool was missing. And as Rebecca shared, we've got lots of speed guns that we can get into the hands of all of you. And just looking forward to getting back out there and working with all of you again.
Yeah. So if you're not from Bethel, we welcome you to participate as well. Walk audits are an amazing tool that you can use in any community. AARP's toolkit and worksheets are free for anyone to download. So you can certainly go ahead and do that. And I will share out links after this call if you want to use those in your own places. But if you want to come and participate in Bethel's training or get out on the street here and you're not from town, we would welcome you to do that as well. Dayton or Kelly, any final words of wisdom, suggestions, top thing you would recommend people do if they care about this in their towns?
Stay involved, think bike, think walk, and think about the space of the street, right? I think one thing we've all touched on at different points is, how do we slow traffic down? How do we make it a safer space? And as you know, Rebecca mentioned in your previous Better Block exercises, is changing the structure of the street, changing what people see. Changing a speed limit won't do a darn thing, and there's a lot of studies to back that up. So think about how we change the space, and we'll do our best to help you do it.
Great advice, Dayton. The only thing I would add is like also put yourself in other people's shoes and think about how it is to get around the community through a different perspective. I think that's really helpful. And it's wonderful to know that you guys have already conducted an accessibility audit. But any way that you can bring more perspective and input to the process, the better and richer it will be.
Fabulous. Great. I see one other ringer on the call I want to put on the spot, and he can also pass. Jonathan Weber's here from Local Motion, which is an amazing advocacy organization around bike and pedestrian improvements. Jonathan, do you want to say any words about what you offer or how folks can tap into Local Motion?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I just got an email for this meetup and figured I'd drop in. My role is really helping local grassroots groups and communities all around Vermont help their communities become better for walking and biking. And that sort of takes a lot of different forms. It changes in every community. One of the things that we do is, demonstration projects like you've done in Bethel. So we help a lot of communities pull those off. I also do a lot of sort of like strategic planning assistance with local groups. And beyond that, just sort of, participating in this sort of process and giving perspective where it's appropriate and maybe helping folks who are engaged come up with some ideas and some visions, And one thing that I would say is, especially when we're talking about the downtown, there's a great quote from a urban planner named Jeff Speck, who talks about, would you rather have a place that is fast to drive through or one that is worth arriving at? So that's something you might think about when you're in your downtown.
Thanks, Jonathan. So I'm going to throw up a closing poll for those of you who are going to jump off, or even those of you who are staying on, thinking about some of the ideas that you heard tonight for potential improvements. I don't have all of them as options here, but just want to get a sense out of what you heard, what would be the top 3 things you most want to see if you're from Bethel or if you are not from Bethel in your own community? If you had to pick 3, what would you think we should prioritize? So while you look at that for a minute, just a quick snapshot of what's coming next. For those of you who are sticking around for the conclusion of our workshop tonight, we will pull up our interactive map and spend some time actually doing a virtual tour and walk out of Bethel streets for a few minutes. We'll let you all put pins on the map if you can access it directly. And if you can't access the map, we can help you do that. So we'll just try to collect some information from all of you about what you think is important here and what you love. Where do you want to go? Where are the places you want our street infrastructure to be better? And then we'll spend the concluding few minutes talking about some ideas as well as we do look ahead to having Better Block come back and look ahead to the plan. What are the things you most want to see us focus on? I'll give you all a couple last minutes to respond to the poll. While doing that, I want to call out Julie's great comment in the chat as well, saying it's not a travel problem, but some of the building steps are difficult to use. So absolutely, and this is really why we are not doing one of these forums, but why we're doing 4 of them, because we have to look at all of these issues in an integrated way. If we make our streets absolutely amazing, but no one can get into the buildings, we have a problem. So on the 23rd, we will look specifically at that. You can come back and hear the results of the accessibility audit, which looked at exactly questions like those. How do we get people into buildings? How do we make sure that they can hear and see the menu offerings in shops once they get there or talk to shopkeepers? Same thing in our town hall and school and public spaces. So that'll be a great chance to weigh in on that question. All right, last chance on the poll. We'll close it out. Okay, so what are our top improvements? Better sidewalk, crosswalk maintenance and accessibility. Great point. Beautification, placemaking, and creating lively public spaces. And then we've got some votes for a few more. Better bus stops and transits. That's great. Benches and bike racks, and new sidewalks and crosswalk extensions. So great transition here. Before we go into interactive map, I just want to thank Kelly so much for being here tonight. I know she's going to jump off, but if you do come back and participate in walk audits, we will see Kelly again later. Oh, whoops, I see a comment from Tom. You only got to pick 1. Well, put your other votes in chat if you want to do that. So Kelly, thank you so much. We'll see you in a couple of weeks for training and walk audits. Dayton, thank you as well. We would love to have you stay on if you want to listen more and participate. And if you want to jump off, that is fine. So I'm going to share a link with those of you who are sticking around, and then I will share my screen. If you want to open this link in your browser, feel free to do that. This will take you to our interactive map and comment form for Bethel for All. So you will get to a page like this. This is live and you can explore it anytime and forward the link around to your friends. So please come back after the call, add more feedback, whatever you want to do. This page here is about streets, and we also do have pages set up for different topics as well. So you can certainly enter your comments in the chat. These are a lot of the same kinds of questions we've been asking you tonight, but you can add more detail and thoughts anytime. But for tonight, we're going to spend a little bit of time playing with this interactive map and see what you all want to mark as places that are great or challenging. Here's your quick tutorial. If you are opening this in your own browser, you can scroll down on the page. This map itself is going to operate pretty much like any Google map or interactive map. You can use the plus button to zoom in, the minus button to zoom out. If you put your cursor over the map, anywhere on the map, and hold down your left mouse button and then drag your mouse, you can move that around anywhere you want to go. And if you find you get really lost and you have no idea where you are, but somewhere over in Rochester, just click that home button and it will take you right back. So for tonight, we're going to spend about 10 minutes on that brainstorming and get a sense of what you all want to put on the map for specific places we should really be looking at. And we've got 3 choices of what we can put on here. So a red pin is a problem spot, basically, somewhere that's hard to access, somewhere you'd like to walk and bike, but can't right now, or it feels unsafe, or there's something getting in the way of this being a great accessible street. Green means it's a great spot. It's somewhere you love to walk and bike or get around. It's somewhere that feels pretty safe and feels pretty easy to access right now. And yellow is where you have a specific idea for change. The way you add a pin is to come over on the left where it says editor and click add feature. And then you can click which color pin you want. So I'm going to drop a red one because I just heard a comment today on Facebook. So once you've clicked the color, come back to the map and put your cursor wherever you want to mark it. The comment I heard today was Peavine Boulevard is really unsafe and people almost get hit all the time. So I'm going to click there. You can see a red pin appearing and then come over to the comment box. People, whoops, I can't spell tonight, will almost get hit walking on Peavine. And then click that blue add button and your pin and comment is there. You can also click on an existing pin and see what other people have written. So when you're seeing all these pins right now, these are comments and ideas that people have already dropped for us. Whoops, I'm going to zoom back out. So when we take a look at what is on the map, we see a lot of red on street ideas in Bethel. We see some green and some yellow. So let's see if we can add some more pins to the map tonight. We're going to do this for another, 5 to 7 minutes here and just see what we can put on and then have a little bit of a conversation about it. If you do have this open in your own browser, feel free to dive in and start adding your own pins right now and put on whatever you want. If you're not from Bethel, feel free to still put pins on the map if you have been here or ever visited or have any impressions of the town. If you do not have this open in your own browser, then I'm going to ask folks to just come off mute and tell me if there's a pin you want to put on the map, and I will drop it for you, or you can put a comment into chat and tell us where you'd like it to go. And we've got some other folks who would be able to help add that as well. So anybody have something you want to put on the map or a question? If you want me to zoom in and look closely somewhere, we can go take a look at a spot too.
Well, I was thinking about a red pin on the library building, Rebecca, because it's a great old building, but it's not tremendously accessible. It could use some help with that. So you can drive up behind it. You can see it up there. You can drive up behind it, but then there's a little step to get into the building.
Okay.
And our front sidewalk is not ideal either. I guess there's just some modernization that needs to happen so that it's really accessible.
Okay, great. So let's maybe put a couple pins on here for the library, Lisa. When you say
Sure.
front sidewalk, do you mean this pathway here?
Yes.
Okay, and what would you say about that specifically?
I think the grade of it is not, it just doesn't feel, I mean, I think it doesn't, the sidewalk goes downhill and then there's a bunch of little steps at the bottom. And I just think they need to be sort of brought more up to code. It doesn't feel very safe somehow.
Perfect. And we can also put one on the back and say,
Right.
There's accessible parking, but a step.
Right, but then a step into the building, right?
Okay, I'm not gonna worry about spelling too much.
No, that's cool.
Trying to type too fast. Great.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anybody else want to look at a particular spot or put a pin on here? Where do you love to go? What's tough? I see a comment from Julie, walk linking the rec facility and athletic field to downtown. So yeah, let's zoom over there and take a look. Here are the athletic fields. And here's our rec facility. So we've got a pool, we've got the parking lot. So Julie, can you say more about what you'd want to see here? We do have sidewalks from here extending into town. They're not the best condition and very narrow along here.
Just a minute.
And I would say it's, if you want to go from the rec center to the fields, there needs to be better accessibility. I don't believe that there's a crosswalk or anything, but I think that needs to be addressed.
Okay.
Is getting from the center to the fields or from the fields to the center.
Well, that's a good addition to the walk business. My point is trying to get places accessible that people might then walk when they now aren't. If parking is a problem at the athletic field, then park downtown and walk, kind of thing. That's what I was looking at.
I want to make sure I really understand your comment, Julie. So right now there is parking at the sports field. There is parking downtown. We have sidewalks. So what kind of change are you looking for?
Well, connecting downtown to the athletic field and conversely then up to the rec facility
Okay.
and skate park.
So in terms of connecting, do you mean more signage, letting people know they can?
No,
get there, or-
sidewalk.
Okay, because there is sidewalk already. That
Is
whole
there all the
stretch.
way?
Yep. To the rec center, yes. There's
Okay.
not quite to the fields, very close, but the sidewalk ends right about here.
Right about there,
This
yeah.
is the old Valley Motors building, and
Well-
here's the driveway. So Ellie's right. There's no crosswalk, but there is
There's
a
no
sidewalk.
crosswalk and nothing tying that entrance you had the marker on to the recreation facility.
Okay, great. Jonathan, do you want to jump in? Yeah.
Yeah, well, the discussion of linking the sort of the downtown to the rec fields, just made me notice that if you walk along Route 12, it looks like that's a pretty long walk to get to that driveway to the rec fields.
Yeah.
But
It
the
is.
soccer fields is actually, as the crow flies, not very far from the bridge and from downtown. So I wonder about creating a more direct path for people walking and biking
Yeah.
from the bridge right over into the soccer fields.
That's another option or another way I was looking at it.
Yeah.
There is a path behind the brick church, but it's very steep. You'd see kids have used it.
Yeah. Yeah. So to point out to people, here's the brick church, if you can see where my cursor is circling. And that path Hillary's talking about, actually, there's a dot here already saying there's a little trail up through the woods that would make a nice connection. And Yes, it is steep. That would be tough if you have mobility challenges. For those of you who don't know, Bethel actually applied for a major outdoor recreation grant from the state in the fall. We have not heard yet whether we've gotten it, but a big part of that is doing exactly this kind of detailed planning and putting in some new trail connections so that we can walk there. And that is definitely one of the spots that was identified. In Dreamland, this over here is the Marsh Meadow Park right beside Bethel Mills. And at one point there was discussion of having a lovely little footbridge right across from that park to the sports fields. So you could basically have a really nice walking loop downtown. At this point, I have no idea how realistic that would be, but if that's something that you think is a great idea or want to see, we can drop a pin on the map for it.
Drop a pin.
Drop a pin?
Yep. I like the idea.
I love it.
I think Marsh Meadow in general has a lot of potential for some recreational paths, and it's a pretty spot, but it's fairly isolated. So it may be that I don't know if people don't feel safe walking out there, or maybe the paths need work.
Does the town own that, or does Bethel Mills?
Yeah, it's one of the buyout properties from Tropical Storm Irene.
Yeah, and people do use it, because when we were looking at it years ago, we cleaned up a lot of trash. There was a lot of
yeah, they do. Yeah,
so it is used by people for kind of not such great things.
Partying.
It would be nice to fix it so that people are using it in a good way.
Right.
Yep.
Yep.
But yeah, access is really lousy to that. I mean, you have to walk through Bethel Mills parking lot. There's trucks coming in and out.
Yeah.
You have to go under a bridge. It's hidden.
Yeah.
I had no idea it was there for years.
Yeah. That's why I think it's so hidden that's why the trash and the beer things are there, because
it's hidden. So it's easy to do that kind of stuff out there.
Yeah.
There's also a lot of people that fish there. So,
oh, nice.
There's a lot of different activities that happen there too, not just walking.
So I just added a pin at where the Sand Hill Road comes on to Church Street, because cars go really fast.
Yeah.
On and off of Sand Hill Road. I live right there all the time. And they go really fast when they've come on to Sand Hill Road and they're heading up.
Mm-hmm.
They go really faster in that first corner.
Yeah.
I have a young neighbor who in the summer, well, during the warm months, is out skateboarding on that corner all the time. And I'm always worried about him.
Yeah, wonderful. So I want to encourage you all as well. If you already see a pin in a comment that you agree with, drop your own anyway, because we want to know how many people think that's a really unsafe corner, or how many people would love to see that footbridge over to Marsh Meadow. So please add your own thoughts. Let's transition here. We're down to just a few minutes before 8. I'm actually happy to stay on longer if people want to keep adding more pins or chatting, but I want to make sure we get a few minutes to just talk about some of the ideas or things that are most interesting to you, what priorities you really think should make it to the top of the list in terms of the plan, or things that we should try out this spring or put into place quickly. So I'll leave the map up in case we want to drive in, but wanted just to open it up. Maybe we can kind of go around and hear from everybody if you have something you want to toss in on that front, or something that's a priority to you. And if you don't want to, feel free to pass. So does anybody want to jump in?
I think a priority would be to make it safer for walking on Peabody Boulevard, because I know a lot of people like to walk there, and I have seen such heavy speeding on that road.
Yeah, that's a great
The
one.
bulb outs. Love to see the bulb outs go in downtown sometime in this century.
That is planned again for this summer, Lisa. The town is fully on board and committed to doing it.
Great.
I think we're going to wait and make sure we have the benefit of the planning work from Dayton and his team to decide where they should really go in, and try to make sure we're doing a really good job with outreach and messaging this time to let people know what these are about, why we're messing with their roadway and changing things up. But it will be a great chance for everybody to really be ambassadors on that front if it's something you support, and talk to folks about why this is making a difference and why we're putting things in the roadway and how it helps. What other folks?
You know,
I think River Street area, if people are walking on the River Street area from the, after the bridge, or maybe even before the bridge, there's so many people speeding that it's very difficult for them to get out to even walk your dog.
Okay.
I don't know if there's a sidewalk or not.
There is
but
not.
That's a speed issue. And that's within, I think, the outline.
Yep, it sure is. Great. Other folks.
Along the lines of easier fixes or steps to take, it is, I've lived in Granville for over 20 years now and have honestly never really thought of Bethel as a recreation destination. Yet I've always loved driving through, seeing the river there and the nice little downtown area. It's adding more wayfinding signs, so folks that are passing through can. It's amazing. I had no idea how many great little pockets there were down by the river there, and that they're actually accessible. So, just really signage to let people know that these little gems are present and accessible and available to the public.
Well, include the recreational facility because they have the skate park and the swimming lessons and other things go on there, which I don't know how much publicity they get or where they get it, or I know Ellie tries. It does a good job.
And ice skating when it's appropriate weather. Well, we do have an ice skating rink every year too.
So how many people know when they go down the road that it's up there and what's available? I think the signage issue is a very good point.
Yes, and the committee has been working on signage for a number of years. That's been a priority, and we hopefully will be solving that soon.
Good.
Yeah, when we put this application together, we actually mapped all the little green spaces and parks and assets in Bethel. And I think there were more than a dozen, if we count even really small things on Main Street. And a lot of people don't know they're here. So when we put the application together, we shared an idea that may be familiar to some of you, creating a mini emerald necklace for Bethel. So if you've heard that term before, this is a famous park system in Boston. The emerald necklace is basically a string, a connected route that goes through all these different gems, little parks in Boston. And it's an amazing resource for the people who live there. They call it Boston's backyard, but also a huge tourist destination and economic development attraction. So as Mike's pointing out, there really is a lot here that could draw people in and bring people to spend the day, if only they knew about it. And if only you could easily get between all these different places. So
emerald bracelet. Boston has the necklace. Bethel has the bracelet.
There we go. Yeah, so we do have some fun maps where we actually kind of mocked this up, and it's pretty amazing even for people who do know these spaces to see really how many there are.
They also have an emerald necklace in Cleveland, Ohio, with the metro system. They're connecting all of they have a lot of parks.
Yeah, yep. So yeah, we've got this amazing resource here. It wouldn't actually take that much work to connect them and be able to have a really extensive bikeable, walkable, hikeable trail system here.
Yeah, and we've got something of that in the hills behind us. Up behind, the town hall, there's trails.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
Ideally, you could connect. I don't know if this would ever work, but the Geicos have that forest where you can walk off of Sanders Hill.
Yeah.
Place you can walk up into the forest, and I'm pretty sure that would connect up with some of the town trails. I think John Durkee's wife, Clover, she used to ride her horse up there, I was told. And some of those trails are still marked up there. I haven't really hiked them much because my knees are not so good right at this point, but
yeah,
that seems like a resource.
There are also some nice trails behind the school.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'll give you a sneak peek at what we mapped here when we did put this together. So move these off to the side. So all of these green spaces are town or community owned property one way or another, starting with Carla's Meadow. We do have the school trails and woods. We have the rec center. We have the sports fields, Marsh Meadow. A lot of tiny little green spaces on Main Street that are owned by the town and really could be little parks and accessible areas. Yep, you're mentioning Brandley Town Forest back here, and then 2 pieces here on the opposite side to the river that are town property. So we've got quite a little resource.
Yeah,
that's great.
All right, well, we are at 8 o'clock. I want to thank you all so much on behalf of Bethel University and Bethel for All for being here. Dayton, thank you so much for all your work and data, which is fascinating to see, and your presentation, and everyone for sharing info. Happy to stay on again. If you don't want to jump off, you want to put some more pins on the map or share ideas, feel free to stick around. And otherwise, we will follow up with you all with some links and resources from tonight. Please do go to the website and dump in as much information as you can on these topics. And I hope we'll see you back for some of the other conversations this month. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Rebecca.